Article 1, Section 8, Powers of Congress. The Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, to pay the debts, and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. But all duties, imposts, and excises shall be uniform throughout the United States. So Congress has the power to lay and collect taxes, but the individual power that it's talking about is at the national level, so that the duties, imposts, and excises shall be uniform throughout the United States. They can't give preference to some ports in different states and lower the, let's call them tariffs, that would happen in those cases. There has been some debate. Jefferson and Hamilton debated the meaning of to pay the debts, but that's beyond the scope of this particular podcast. But it is to provide for the common defense and the general welfare of the United States, clearly aligning with preamble goals. These are the most apparent alignment with the preamble goals. Congress also has the power to borrow money on the credit of the United States. This power is what allows the U.S. to operate with a debt or deficit budget. It's the second way that the U.S. government can bring in revenue. The power to lay and collect taxes, to go back to that, is originally only on tariffs and imports. The capitation tax is actually denied in a later section, but then we get the capitation tax of the 16th Amendment, which we know as the income tax. Congress can regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with Indian tribes. This is the Commerce Clause. It is one of the most litigated parts of the Constitution, giving Congress broad and sweeping powers to regulate economic activity across state lines. This was a major problem with the Articles of Confederation. They had no power to regulate commerce, and states would charge tariffs on each other, creating an us against them among the state levels. Also, it is only the national government that can regulate commerce with foreign nations, including trade deals. Though once a trade deal is negotiated, individual states can operate within those trade deals. To establish an uniform rule of naturalization, this is talking about the process of becoming a citizen for immigrants. The laws and regulations about naturalization are set by Congress. Also, uniform laws on the subject of bankruptcies throughout the United States. Congress has the power to coin money, regulate the value thereof, and a foreign coin, and fix the standard of weights and measures. So if you would like to see the U.S. switch to the metric system, call your congressman. To provide for the punishment of counterfeiting and the securities and current coin of the United States. To establish post offices and post roads. President Eisenhower uses this to create the interstate system in the 1950s. To promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. We see this is copyrights and trademark and such things through the Patent Office. It is again regulated by Congress. To constitute tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court. This will be very important once we get to Article 3, because Article 3 says that there will be a Supreme Court and inferior courts, but they don't establish it in the Constitution. It is not until 1789 in the Judiciary Act that Congress actually establishes the court systems. More on that later. To define and punish piracies and felonies committed on the high seas and offenses against the law of nations. Congress, and Congress alone, has the power to declare war. That has sometimes been confused recently. I think the president has the power to get us into wars, but only Congress can declare war. Though we have been involved in many wars, we have not declared war officially since 1941. Grant letters of marque and reprisal. This is a somewhat useless but interesting tidbit. This is a warrant to commit specific acts of piracy. So the Congress could establish a pirate fleet. They did not have a navy at the time. This is the background for this. However, a letter of marque or reprisal hasn't been issued since the War of 1812 and has not seriously been considered since Andrew Jackson. They're actually outlawed by international law since 1856. So no more pirates. and to make rules concerning captures on land and water. To be clear, no more legal pirates, which is what a letter of marque and reprisal would technically be. The Congress has the power to raise and support armies, but no appropriation of money to that use shall be for a longer term than 2 years. So the army is only funded every 2 years, and they have to renew that funding. And then to provide and maintain a navy. So I actually have to correct my earlier statement. They had a navy, although it wasn't much of a navy. They used a lot of merchant vessels to supplement their navy. To make rules for the government and regulation of the land and naval forces. To provide for calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. Here we have a constitutional use of the word militia. It's talking about a national police force. We'll see that again in the Second Amendment, a often controversial amendment for such things as definitions of well-regulated militias. Worth a note that when you're discussing that, this would be a valid place to bring up other uses of the word militia. But they are to execute the laws of the Union. They are to suppress insurrections and repel invasions. This is alluding to Shays' Rebellion, which inspired the calling of the Constitutional Convention in the first place. And then Washington actually uses this to put down the Whiskey Rebellion in 1794. Congress has the power to provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia, and for governing such part of them as may be employed in the service of the United States, serving to the states respectively the appointment of the officers, and the authority of training the militia according to the discipline prescribed by Congress. You see, Congress has a lot of power over the militia and armed forces in the Constitution. To exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district. This district is alluding to what will become the District of Columbia, or as we know it, Washington, D.C. Over such district not exceeding 10 miles square, as may, by cession of particular states, and by the acceptance of Congress, become the seat of government of the United States, and to exercise like authority over all places purchased by the consent of the legislature and of the state in which the same shall be, for the erection of forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings. Those military institutions such as that are technically property of the national government. Even embassies on foreign territory are actually considered to be U.S. territory. And finally, to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by this Constitution in the government of the United States, or in any department or officer thereof. This is the necessary and proper clause, or the elastic clause, and it indicates some implied powers that are only suggested in the Constitution, and it allows Congress to stretch its powers for unforeseen circumstances. So regulating commerce, for example. Nothing mentioned specifically about steamship monopolies. However, Congress is able to regulate state monopolies, and then the Supreme Court upheld the idea in the case Gibbons versus Ogden. Also dealing with segregation, again the Commerce Clause, but Congress has the power then to regulate commerce, but they applied that to any business that conducted business across state lines, and they disallowed segregation in any such businesses. Also, things like the Air Force, not something that the constitutional framers would have considered in 1787. So by the 1900s, the elastic clause allows the Congress to be able to make laws regulating the Air Force. So just some examples there. Two different views, how liberals maybe stretch a little more and conservatives stretch a little less according to the elastic clause, but that is a debate for another time.